Today, we're talking about Elizabeth I, the makeup that may have led to her death. Queen Elizabeth I's signature ghostly makeup typified the 16th century ideal for women, her porcelain skin representing nobility and earthly perfection. But to achieve that perfection, Elizabeth covered her face with makeup composed largely of lead. She also rubbed mercury on her lips, and probably used a mercury-based makeup remover that ate away at her flesh. To achieve this look, Elizabeth wore Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made from white lead and vinegar. She patted her face and neck with the substance, transforming her poxy skin, more on that later, into an eerie porcelain canvas that probably smelled like sour wine. Thanks to 400 years of science, we now know that applying lead to the face on a daily basis causes very serious, and often irreversible problems like hair loss and skin deterioration and death by lead poisoning. It may well have been for Queen Elizabeth, but lead wasn't the only poison in her pigments. Let's look at the other suspect. Made from cinnabar, a toxic mineral containing mercury, the Arl Queen's lip stain gave her the signature red myth that leaps out at you and all those creepy paintings. So we have two horrific poisons working in tandem through skin absorption over long periods of time. On the surface, the lead face slowly corroded the Queen's skin. In response, Elizabeth wore thicker and thicker layers of makeup, reportedly layering makeup an inch thick toward the end of her life. Symptoms of mercury poisoning include memory loss, irritability, and depression, conditions Elizabeth reportedly experienced towards the end of her life. Now, we're getting warmer. After her maids carefully applied lead and mercury makeup to the royal face, Elizabeth herself wore it for at least a week. Forget about pore blockage. The lead soaked into her skin, causing it to turn gray and wrinkled. When Elizabeth finally had her makeup removed, historians suggest she might have used a gross concoction containing eggshells, alum, and you guessed it, more mercury. Some claimed the mercury makeup remover left their skin soft, but that was only because it was literally skinning them alive one layer at a time. As a teen, Queen Elizabeth didn't wear quite so much lead face, not simply because she was a child, but because she hadn't caught smallpox yet. On October 10, 1562, she was struck with a high fever and displayed all the hallmarks of the pox. Courtiers worried that Elizabeth would die within the week, but the young royal survived. Unfortunately, the disease left her with permanent scars in her terrible 20 seconds, when life is either a bed of roses or a garbage fire. And scars don't stack odds against the latter. Smallpox scars were a common problem at the time, hence the willingness of women to wear vinegary lead face. As Henry Sidney, Mary's husband, wrote, "The scars, to her resolute discomfort, ever since have done and do remain on her face." Trying to survive in an atmosphere of constant bitchiness, Elizabeth did everything possible to cover up such blemishes. In a ballsy act of pre-Instagram filtering, Elizabeth flat out forbade unflattering portraits of herself. Painters were given an opportunity to get really creative. They had to make her look young and supple and white, even as she entered her autumn years, which in this case, is a little too good at describing what happens to human skin after decades of lead makeup. Here's the trick: the artists had to make the portrait recognizable as Queen Elizabeth without showing any of the scars, sagging, and perhaps even molten skin beneath that inch-thick white mask. Enter the famous Darnley portrait, painted in 1575. It became a godsend of a model for later portrayals, as grateful artists reused its depiction of Elizabeth's face and paintings for decades. Elizabeth's battle against the ravages of time was fierce and lasted literally all her life. One of her wiser tricks was to wear a wig. In the last months of her life, Elizabeth refused to let doctors examine her. The Queen had fallen into a deep melancholy. Still, Elizabeth refused to rest. She believed that if she lay down, she would never get up, so Elizabeth stood for 15 hours straight. On March 24, 1603, Elizabeth passed away. Possible causes of death include cancer or pneumonia. But Elizabeth's use of lead and mercury-based makeup for decades in increasingly liberal doses certainly at least contributed to her declining health. After a lifetime of lead and mercury poisoning, Elizabeth's body was also toxic. Back to now, people knew what caused hair loss and skin damage, but it took a long time for us to figure out that we were literally killing ourselves in the name of beauty. In many ways, we still are, like it or not. Pain and death for beauty is a very old and well-entrenched tradition, and it's not done with us. So what do you think about Queen Elizabeth's makeup tutorial?